that objective in mind, we are trying to develop. The latest information about this School of Economics is that we are fully prepared to start our academic programs from this academic session, coming academic session, July, August. We will have MA program as well as PhD program. To begin with, our faculty will be joined very recently. Government of Bihar has sanctioned the faculty positions. Now, following usual procedure, very soon the faculty will come, and we hope that we will be able to provide quality teaching, at least at the level of Delhi School of Economics in Patna. And the students who are not so well off, coming from disadvantaged families, they will be benefited when you start a School of Economics. So that is all about my institution. Now, as I said, we made you nervous by mentioning that all the economists, senior economists, will be speaking and participating. But fortunately, when I arrived, welcome address was being given by Adarsh Gupta, and I personally felt that should have been the keynote address, because he has, saved me from that problem of giving a good keynote address, and followed by other speakers, particularly Professor Adhikari. They a very structured view of what is meant by sustainable development, why it is necessary, what are the things to be done, and so on. So on my part, having heard all these speakers, on my part, what I'm going to do is, I'm going to speak on sustainable economic development in India. Sustainable development in India. This is the title that I have fixed for today's lecture. Now, we can please close that one. Okay. Now, as far as I understand, this sustainable development, it has three broad dimensions that we have to consider. One is economic viability. It is all about growth, economic growth. So without growth, there cannot be any development, sustainable development. So one dimension is growth, which we call economic viability. The second most important is social equity. The third one is environmental viability. Now, between these three dimensions, I personally feel that the first two dimensions are most important in a country like India, particularly at the present moment, when our level of industrialization is not that high. It is not comparable to China or US or other developed countries of the world, England also. So the first two dimensions are most important to ensure sustainable development in our country. Now, before we move on, let us start by recollecting the development policies that our country has adopted since independence. Very briefly, you know that if you study the first 5-year plan, first few 5-year plans, you will see that at least up to 4th 5-year plan, the main objective was to maximize growth of GDP in the country. So that was the growth objective dominated over all other objectives in initial 4 5-year plans. So in the 5th plan, for the first time, policies were taken for attainment of what is called employment-oriented growth. That means employment expansion along with growth. That was the objective that started to be adopted from 5th 5-year plan onwards. We hear about anti-poverty programs and those type of programs for poverty reduction, which started in 5th plan onward. from 5th plan onward, and that approach continued till about 8th plan. In the 9th plan period is very significant because it coincides with adoption of economic reforms policies in India. And you all know, particularly the students of economics, even other disciplines, they know by now what is meant by economic reform policies. That happened during 9th plan period. And that approach continued in 10th plan. In 11th and 12th plan, for the first time in the 11th plan, we adopted a strategy of growth which is called inclusive growth. So we started hearing about inclusive growth from 11th plan onwards, and that also continued during 12th plan period. Inclusive growth. So this inclusive growth idea came in 11th and 12th plan period. 2014, there was a change of government, and with change of government, the development strategy is best described by the slogan adopted by the government, which is Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas. Now, when we say that it is Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, that means it is also inclusive growth. And it started with Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, and subsequently got to be extended in the form of firstly Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, Sabka Vishwas. Now, Sabka Vishwas, faith, that is possible to achieve provided you have everybody in your growth process. If you can include everybody in your growth process. And the final slogan is Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, Sabka Vishwas, and what is one more? Sabka Prayas. Am I correct? So it is basically, by and large, continuation of inclusive growth strategy, which is very important for ensuring sustainable development. Another thing I would like to point out here is very briefly what is meant by inclusive growth. And I will also explain where from this idea of inclusive growth originated. When I say that India adopted inclusive growth strategy during 11th 5-year plan, and Bhaumik in Alvaria was the deputy chairman of planning commission. He drafted that plan document, 11th 5-year plan document. That tends to give the impression that it is the brainchild of Bhaumik in Alvaria. But the fact is, it is not his brainchild. In this context, two points I would like to mention. Those who belong to the subject of political philosophy or philosophy in general, they would know that during the decade of 70s and 80s, American political philosophers did a lot of research on a subject which led to development of the idea of what is called, quote unquote, equality of opportunity. It is called equality of opportunity philosophy. The key prominent American philosophers in this context are Dorothy, Richard Arneson, and J.A. Bodh. And the ideas advanced by these three American philosophers got translated in the algorithm of economics by John Rawls, who wrote a book in 1998. The title of the book is Equality of Opportunity. So that is the first theoretical work which helps to develop the idea of equality of opportunity, which in other words led to inclusive growth idea. This is one thing. Another thing, students of economics and other social science disciplines should know, there is a report called World Development Report, which is published every year. So World Development Report 2006, that provided the blueprint for application of inclusive growth strategy in different countries of the world, particularly underdeveloped countries of the world. And when that report was being prepared, that time Montexin Anwalia was in World Bank. So he was familiar with this idea of inclusive growth. And when he was invited by Montexin, the Prime Minister, to become Deputy Chairman of Planning Commission, he opposed with the government implemented, because that is also the mandate of World Bank. World Bank that you go in for in. So this is how this whole idea came. Now the essence of inclusive growth strategy is that growth of per capita income is not the true indicator of economic development. Okay, this is also the idea which is held by even Amartya and many other development economists. So they say that whether a country is developing or not can be understood only by observing whether in the process of development and growth there is distribution of opportunities equally among the individuals, particularly among those who have been deprived of different opportunities. Opportunity of employment, opportunity of health, opportunity of education, their political rights. So these are the opportunities. And unless we equalize opportunities among the people, particularly the backward class people, particularly among economically weaker sections, we will not be able to achieve high level of growth and development. Only by maximizing growth of GDP and only by looking at the trend of per capita GDP, we will not be able to say whether the country is having development. Okay? So this is how this whole idea came, and that was the justification. One would like to know what is the rationale behind this whole philosophy and this whole idea of equalization of opportunities. Now, equalization of opportunities. Now, to explain the rationale of this, I can mention many points, but the key points are the following. Firstly, we can say that having equal opportunity for employment, for health, for education, and so on is a basic right of human beings. So if we believe in basic human rights, then equalization of opportunities will be necessary. It can be justified. Secondly, it is unethical and immoral to treat individuals differently. We cannot say that you will not be allowed to study in a good school because you belong to a lower caste, or you belong to a minority community, or if you are a woman. So it means that it is it is unethical and immoral to treat individuals differently based on their caste affiliation or caste affiliation or class affiliation or their sex and so on. Most importantly, by following inclusive growth, we will be able to utilize our human and physical resources more efficiently. So inclusive growth or equalization of opportunities would be necessary for better utilization, more efficient utilization of human resources as well as physical resources. Another point which is very important in the context of discussion of sustainability, sustainability does not mean environmental sustainability alone. Environmental sustainability is one part of sustainability. But what is more important or equally important is having a system sustainable from social point of view, from political point of view. Okay. In other words, if we follow inclusive growth strategy, that will lead to greater social cohesion, reduction of social conflict, and economic inequality. So if these are the objectives, then we can go in for inclusive growth strategy or sustainable, which will lead to sustainable development strategy. Now, this is all about the background of inclusive growth, sustainable development linked together that I have presented. Now, in the next, what I am going to do is, next. In the next part, what I am going to do is, since time is very clear, and this whole topic of the seminar, it's a very vast topic. One can speak days after days, yet it will not end. Like Mahabharata. In separate Ramayana, who is to observe in television. So I will be selected in my approach. So what I am going to do is, I have pointed out that the objective of inclusive growth and sustainable development, and the objective, The first objective is to have growth of economy. Okay? So what is the pattern of growth of Indian economy? That then I will go in for, since we want reduction in disparity, not only interpersonal disparity, but also disparity across states, across regions, and so on. So I will also talk a little bit about interstate disparity in growth. Then hello? So what I am saying is, firstly, I will briefly explain the growth performance of Indian economy, because without growth, there cannot be any further. Very difficult. What should I say? No, very difficult. Actually, I woke up at 5 o'clock and I had 4.5 hours very painful road journey. And I am 66 years of age, a diabetic patient. Secondly, I will speak about little bit about interstate disparity in growth. Then I will talk little bit about expansion of opportunities, because that is one of the important things that you have to do under inclusive growth and sustainable development. I will speak very little on employment, health and education, most important. There are other things also. I will not speak about women empowerment or establishment of political rights, individual freedom, and so on. So that I will speak. And finally, I will speak little bit about reduction in inequality, because that is one of the objectives of inclusive growth and sustainable development. Now, coming to economic growth part. Coming to economic growth part. Now, if you look at this diagram, actually in our subject, in the subject of economics, this is also a very controversial issue, how you compute the growth rate, computation of growth rate, because the figures will differ according to the methodology followed. So I will not go into the detail of that part. I can say that there is a recent article published in Economic and Political Weekly by one of the experts in this area, Kulapar Balakrishnan. Dr. Kumar might be knowing. Kulapar Balakrishnan is a very famous economist specialized in this type of work. So he calculated growth of Indian GDP starting from 1950 to 2020. And he has divided the period into different sub-periods. Again, objectively following appropriate econometric methods, not arbitrary. Now, if you look at the trend, it is rising trend. Growth rate is increasing. Growth of GDP is increasing in India. But if you look at these figures, you will see that till about 1980, we had on average 3.5% annual growth rate of GDP, which is popularly known as Hindu rate of growth. Okay? Now, from after economic reform, from 1990-91, growth rate has picked up. It started increasing. Okay? And then we are trend of having higher growth rate during post-reform period. And if you look at last 20 years, then the growth rate has been on average 6.5% per annum. So what is the conclusion? Conclusion is, after adoption of economic reforms, India has been able to almost double the growth rate of GDP, which is indeed an achievement in the context of India. But there is also a dark side of this story. What is that dark side? What is that dark side? The dark side is, if you go further into the details of state level performances, you will see that the state level performances during the last 20 years vary widely. It is only a few states where growth of state GDP, which is also called state NSDP, net state domestic product, that NSDP growth rate in some states are very high and in many other states it's very low. So we do not have a situation of uniform growth pattern across states of India. Apart from this, there is some information available with me with regard to growth of per capita NSDP. Now, if you look at per capita NSDP, you will see that the difference among the states becomes more sharper, more sharp. It becomes more sharp. You can see quickly in a state like Bihar, we have per capita NSDP currently, which is almost 1/3 of per capita NSDP for all India. Although Bihar has achieved very high growth rate of NSDP, total NSDP. So what I am trying to say is that there are some states which are still immensely poor in terms of having low per capita incomes, and there are some states where the per capita income is very high. For instance, in Maharashtra, Gujarat, Tamil Nadu, these are the states which are, where the per capita income is very high. Now, if you see in this context, the researchers would like to know whether over time there is convergence among the states. That means the difference among the states is reducing or not. Ideally, we would like to have a situation of convergence. That means poorer states will grow faster and richer states will not have that amount of growth rate, so that the gap between the rich and poor state will fall. That is for convergence. Unfortunately, the research studies that have been conducted, even I also did some exercise on this particular issue. Okay, I found that and many other, it is almost, the conclusion is almost unanimous among the researchers that till now we do not have a picture of convergence, rather we have a picture of divergence. That means the developed states are moving ahead at a faster rate and the poorer states are not being able to pick up with those developed states. So the gap persists, which is indicative of inequality. And formally you can compute the level of inequality in this respect. We find that the inequality increases. For instance, one measure of inequality, is Gini inequality coefficient, when it has been calculated in a recent book published by Mishra. It is published in 2023 by Routledge. So he has analyzed in detail, and that gives you the latest available information on all these aspects. Okay, it is very clearly found that Gini inequality increased from 0.22 to 0.28. That means instead of declining inequality, we are having increasing inequality among the states with regard to growth of GDP and per capita GDP or per capita NSDP. Now we come to employment part. Now again, it's a very vast topic. I mean, employment, you know that data are available from NSSO. After 2011-12, they used to collect data under a survey called Employment-Unemployment Survey. From 2017 onwards, 17-18 onwards, they are collecting data under a survey which is named as Periodic Labor Force Survey. And we have data available up to 2021-22. And the data for 2021-22 was published just a week back from now. So I have looked into that latest available data also. Now, after looking into these data sets, what are the conclusions that we can draw? Very, very important conclusions. The first conclusion is, in the context of India, during the period of economic reforms, there has been a setback with regard to employment. That means our GDP growth is very high, GDP is growing, but employment is not growing. That means we have a situation of jobless growth. We have growth, but without jobs. Secondly, whenever you have some jobs, these jobs are mostly in the informal sector of the economy. And in the informal sector, out of total workers in our country, 91% of the workers are involved in informal sector. What is the problem with informal employment? The problem is, for informal employment, the earnings will be low, much low compared to a formal employment. There will be no job security. There will be no social security. And these jobs are mostly casual, contractual type and also self-employment. Okay? And within self-employment also, unlike China, in China, self-employment sector is a dynamic sector. But in our country, the self-employment sector is basically low-paid employment, which is, which the people are involved in. So there are, if you divide self-employment sector into productive self-employment sector and less productive or non-productive self-employment sector, in our country, the type of self-employment we have for majority of the self-employed people, these are all low productive or low earnings self-employment sector. So what it means? It means quality of employment is deteriorating, and we have poor quality of employment. Firstly, there is not adequate employment expansion, and whatever employment is available, 91% of that is available in the informal sector, which we call poor quality employment. Another important striking observation, recent development from 1999, 2000 onwards till 2021-22 is loss of employment for women. Female employment suffered massive loss during the period of economic reforms. If you look separately for rural and urban areas, you will find that the greatest fall with regard to female employment happened in agriculture. You probably know that in rural areas, females are more involved in agriculture compared to males. But there also, there is drastic decline in employment for females from agriculture sector. And in the non-agriculture sector, their participation is very low. If you look into the growth rate of employment for pre-reforms and post-reforms period, you will observe that during post-reforms period, the growth rate of employment reduced significantly compared to pre-reforms period. That means we have been doing better with regard to employment expansion before 93, 94. Okay? But as soon as from the day we adopted economic reform policies, our growth of employment is declining. And in recent sub-periods, the employment growth has unfortunately turned out to be negative for females. It's negative for females. You get my point? So these are some of the key observations from employment. I also had something to say about employment of different social and religious groups. Just 2 points I will mention in 2 sentences. If we compare the employment characteristics of different social groups, you will see that labor force participation rates as well as workforce participation rates are higher for weaker castes like SCs and STs. That does not mean that they are having all good quality employment. But for the minorities, particularly Muslims, the labor force participation rate and workforce participation rates are low. That means they are not only disadvantaged with regard to involvement in poor employment, poor quality employment, but also they are not having as much employment as the Hindus. I'm talking about the minorities of Muslims. Okay, so these are some of the most important findings in short time that we can now. You just go on scrolling. These are data. Just to save time, I will not go through all these things. You come down. Just one. This is also very important. Sectoral distribution of workers. What is the current situation? The current situation is even in 2021-22. I will be brief. That's good. So this rural urban if you see for the country as a whole, combining rural and urban areas, you will see that even today, 46% of our workers are involved in agriculture. If you focus on rural areas, in rural areas, 59% of the workers are still in agriculture. Now, why I say this, why I mention this finding, because in your future development strategy, you have to keep this point in mind. You have not been able to shift your labor force from agriculture sector to non-agriculture sector, or from agriculture to manufacturing. Manufacturing employment has not been satisfactory. Even it is declining in the context of India. For the students of economics, development economics, it implies that the so-called Lewis mechanism has failed to work in the context of India. What is Lewis mechanism? Lewis mechanism says that as the country develops, more people will be relieved from agriculture and they will be involved in, they will be absorbed in manufacturing. So that mechanism is not working, it has failed to work in the context of India. Now we will go to next. So there are some health indicators, education and health. Yeah, next, before this. Next. So again, I'm not, go into the
another slide down.
This education and health.
This one.
Next one. Next one. Next. Education and health. Okay. There is a table also. Some key statistics I have given. Almost, I have tried to include latest available information also in that table. So I'm not, explaining that. Just 2-3 points let me mention. If you look at the health data and education data, you will see that some improvement has taken place in both these respects in recent years. But we still have a miles to go with regard to ensuring access to education and ensuring health for all. Okay. Now, with regard to health, just one observation I will give you. If you see the persons who are being treated in our country, who obtain treatment in the event of a disease, okay, you will find that only 30% of the people in our country today depend on government hospitals. That means 70% of our people get their treatment from private hospitals, private doctors. You can understand the implication of it. For a country, okay, with 130 billion people. I'll not explain the implication, you can feel what is the implication. With regard to, there are other indicators also like infant mortality rate, child mortality rate, maternal mortality rate, all these data are given here. Some progress is visible, but we are far away from a country with whom we always like to compare ourselves, that is China. We are far away from China in this figure. Okay? If you see mean years of schooling at a global level today in 2020, mean years of schooling of the workforce at the global level is 8.7 years. But in India, it is only 6.7. So we are not, even at the level of global average. So this is the situation. Now, regarding malnutrition, hunger, we hear a lot. We read from newspaper also. There is a report known as Global Hunger Index. The latest available report, this index, this Global Hunger report, it gives you some idea about the level of nutrition of the people. It says that in 2022, out of 121 countries for which this index value was calculated, India's rank is 107. Okay? And those who prepared this report, they have categorized the countries into different levels. Now, India falls in this level, this yellow part, and that is the value of index. And they say that the level of hunger in India is serious. So even after so much of growth, our level of hunger is very serious. So that gives you an understanding about what we have achieved with regard to nutrition, okay, or to prevent undernutrition. The next slide is about inequality. One of the speakers mentioned about global world inequality report. And he has rightly pointed out that in India, at the moment, 1% of total income of the country is captured by, of the total income of the country, 22% is captured by 1% individuals. So for 1%, you have 22% of your income, and for 1%, you have 1/3 of country's total wealth. On the other hand, for bottom 50%, their income share is 13%, and their wealth share is even poorer. It is only 5.9%. Next. This is a very interesting graph. It traces the shares of the people, different groups of people, starting from 1900 to 2020. And you can see that during the British period, till about 1940, our level, the disparity, gap between bottom and top was very high. That started reducing, continued up to 1980. And you know that during the decade of 1980s, when Rajiv Gandhi became chief minister, he slowly started adopting some kind of economic reforms policies which have been formally accepted and implemented by Manmohan Singh from 1991. And you see what happened afterwards. The gap in income share of bottom 50% of population and top 110% is widening. So there is no sign of inequality reduction. And if you see the blue card, the income share of bottom 10% is declining over time instead of increasing. And that of top 10% is increasing instead of declining. So this is the scenario. You may or may not agree with this type of research. So this is the scenario. If you go to next part, that also I skip. Same story follows with regard to wealth distribution. You see, over time, the gap between red line and your blue line is increasing. That means, though the poor is being pushed to the wall more and more, and the rich is moving towards the sky. So that is the scenario with regard to income and wealth distribution. Now, finally, achievement of SDG goals. That is also very important. We know, all of you know, perhaps, what is SDG, what are the things to be, targets to be fulfilled. So there has been a report published recently. It is called State of India's Environment Report. It says that if your objective is to attain a point which is 100, at the moment you are much below 100, that means you get 0.66. So that means only 66% of your target has been fulfilled. What is the implication? Implication is, if you want to fulfill SDG goals 100%, you have to accelerate your pace of development, and you have to be more proactive. You have to come up with policies which only will lead to achievement of 10% sustainable development goals. Okay? Now there are many suggestions which are given to correct this situation of loss of employment, situation of increasing inequality. We are unable to speak about poverty because after 2011-12, we are unable to calculate poverty in the context of India, because poverty is used to be calculated by using consumer expenditure survey data, which is not being collected by NSSO. Okay, but with regard to inequality, we have seen increasing inequality, increase in gap between rich and poor, employment setback, no expansion of employment, only informal employment, which are poor quality employment, no expansion of formal employment. Okay, and above all, employment has suffered. Employment setback has happened more profusely for the women compared to men during this regime of inclusive growth. Okay, so Having observed all these things, I personally feel that if you want to have a sustainable economic development in India, the most important issue would be firstly serious effort to increase employment. And you have to be very careful, you have to remember that we are going to enter into an era of robotics, artificial intelligence, which will destroy many jobs. So situation might aggravate in near future, and the government is emphasizing on promotion of those technologies. So you have to be well prepared so that the general masses, general people, less educated people, unskilled people, they do not lose their jobs. So that means you have to enhance their skill levels, you have to keep training to them, so that preparedness would be extremely necessary. This is the first thing. And secondly, just 2 minutes, bureaucracy. It's very difficult, you understand. Because everybody is hungry, I understand. I'm also equally hungry. I'm also equally hungry. Another thing, again, it's my hunch. It is very easy to say that you expand employment opportunities, but it has not been expanded. So there is a strong view held by a large number of economists, including Abhijit Vinayak Banerjee, Nobel laureate, Raghuram Rajan, Kaushik Basu, such type of economists, development economists, they say that India should implement one minimum income support program. Minimum income support program. That means you put money in the hands of people, poor people, particularly rural people. And it is by putting that money in the hands of rural people, you will be able to tackle the crisis which has been generated by your economic reform policy. Okay? So that is another thing which is very important. I also believe that, given our little bit of understanding about Indian economic development, particularly in rural areas, I also feel that it is high time that the government implements a basic minimum support program, basic minimum for everyone. And since next Lok Sabha election is round the corner, I hope before Lok Sabha election that will be announced. That will be announced. I hope. Anyway, there are many other points I skipped. Just 1 or 2 sentences. So you have seen Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, Sabka Vishwas, Sabka Prayas. Following this, we are now in a Amrit Kal. When Amrit Kal started in 2022, in the 75th year of independence. And what is the duration of Amrit Kal? 25 years. So 22 to 2047 is our Amrit Kal. We hope that we all eat Amrit and get healthy.
No more.
Amrit, I do not know what is the composition of Amrit. What will be there in your plate as Amrit, I do not know, but we are in Amrit Kal. And in our Amrit Kal, that is not only our responsibility. We want to emerge as Vishwa Guru. So as a Vishwa Guru, the Vishwa will appreciate us, listen us, provided we are strong enough. Our masses are strong enough. So I hope that all these ambitions are fulfilled in the years to come. Thank you.
Participants are requested to ask questions if they have.
You agree that we had a very educating and provoking as well. But we are waiting for our food also. There will not be any justice and participation that we have been talking about inclusion, and we will not include the questions. So we can have 5 questions, very briefly, no observation and comments, pointed questions, so that we can put it when we have some lunch after this. So floor is open. 5 questions. Please, please support the mic to the participants.
मेरा मैंने कहीं पढ़ा था वो गलत हो सकता है क्योंकि मैंने एक जगह पढ़ा कि साउथ ईस्ट एशिया के 50,000 बच्चे अपना पहला बर्थडे नहीं देख पाते हैं। उस रिपोर्ट का नाम है हंगर एमनेस्टी। हंगमा की रिपोर्ट है कि साउथ ईस्ट एशिया में 50,000 बच्चे अपना फर्स्ट बर्थडे नहीं देख पाए। यह वर्ड सिनेरियो में क्या मैसेज देता है?
Yes. Second one.
अच्छा
एक ही बार. No. Just few more down, please. We have to manage time. We have to manage time. So, mic एक 2 माइक रखिए, एक खुद दीजिए, दूसरे के पास रहिए तो जल्दी होगा। हाँ, प्लीज।
On the integration of economic, social, and environment. But the question is to be debated whether India can show sustainable development without eco-friendly use of technology or not.
Yes, from the back.
The second pointed out that but there are studies saying that poverty. So how do you see this?
Yeah, I got your point.
Done. Next one. पीछे वहाँ पीछे. You are not audible.
minimum economic guarantee is feasible or not? This representative was been said that minimum guarantee scheme should be there. So my question is that
Only one more. This will be the last.
Sir, I want to ask that we are talking about development and everything, but about human development, there is nothing much said. And without human development, sustainable in we can't sustain in economic development. So it is a very important part in the growth of our economy. So what is your opinion about that?
Professor Bhaumik, you have only 5 minutes time. And he very brief. Please cooperate with us.
Okay, let me first take up the poverty question. Firstly, you know that when you say that there is decline in poverty, your finding is based on income poverty. But you know that there are other indicators also for measurement of poverty, which is known as multidimensional poverty. Okay? So almost all the studies show that if you consider income as well as non-income dimensions of poverty, you will see that multidimensional poverty in India is not declining to any expected extent. Okay. Now, regarding your income poverty also, I told you, I mentioned it, that whatever observation we have is based on data which are available up to 2011-12. Even after 2011-12, we do not have any figure to draw that type of conclusion. I am not saying that with economic growth, poverty will not decline. Poverty may decline. But that does not mean that people will have a higher standard of living. Because there are other non-income factors like education, health, their access to drinking water, so many things. So that is what you have to remember. So only income poverty, it will decline, definitely. And again, there is a tricky part of this conclusion. Tricky part is you fix your poverty line at a very low level. You understand? Roughly, it will be 30 rupees per day per head, including male and female together today. Do you think that a person can survive with 30 rupees per day in our country? So, having set the poverty line at a very low level, you undo that, yes, our poverty is declining. So that type of conclusion is not correct.
सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने जो जमा किया वो तो 28 ही और 25 रुपया था ना।
हाँ वही तो एवरेज में केस बोल रहा
कर दिया तो सब
ठीक है
ठीक था।
हाँ अच्छा now regarding eco-friendly technology, yes, I fully agree with you. You need eco-friendly technology. Like many other things you need, we also need eco-friendly technology so that we control the problem of environmental pollution. Now there is one question on women development. I have already mentioned. The greatest sufferer during last 20 to 25 years in the context of India has been the women, has been the backward class people, has been the minorities. They are the disadvantaged people, women, even youth, old aged persons. So unless we look into their problems, we will not be able to have an inclusive. That is also all the problems. Okay, in the context of Bihar, you know that this has been one of the first areas of Bihar government in recent times to enhance the conditions of women and their empowerment. You would be probably know that we are going to have one international conference on 2nd and 3rd June, and the title of the conference is Development with Justice. That we have expected. Many scholars from abroad, established universities in America and other places, Europe, they are also likely to join us in that conference. So women issues are very much there at the level of policy making, and of course some of the states are front runner in this context, and some of the states are not so serious about it, which is why you will hear about abuse and violence against women happening more, rape, murder, etc. happening more in those states. Okay, so this is the thing, but this is not correct to say that this issue is neglected. This issue is very much being looked into. There is another question, that is the problem. Okay, what is that? Employment. What are the questions related to employment? Minimum support. See, I would have mentioned it during my concluding part, and I'd like to know where from the money will come if you have to implement a minimum income support program for all. There are many ways to do it. Two things I will mention. One thing which I will not have to produce any empirical evidence here, because you all know it is coming every day, almost every day in newspaper. You see the amount of non-performing assets of commercial banks. And who are the persons responsible for this not repaying loans taken from commercial banks? It is the big corporates. It is the big corporates. And you are writing off loans for big corporates, and you say that you don't have money if you have to implement a minimum income support program. So this is one thing. Another thing, the reduction in corporate tax rate that has been given in recent times to the corporates. You just look into those figures and you will see that if you add these two together, you will be able to provide income support not only to the poor, but probably 10% population, whoever is interested. So it is your priority that will determine whether you will be able to implement that type of program. If your priority is to see the interest of corporates, obviously the policy will be different. And if your objective is to see the interest of poor people, have-nots of the society, disadvantaged people, you will approach the matter differently. There was another question. What is that? This is the fourth question. Is there any other question that I have not answered? This was last one. Okay. Thank you. Go and have a good lunch.
Thank you, Prof Bhaumik, and you will agree that this session was very fruitful, educative. 2-3 points I would like to flag in here. All the debates that we are doing about the inclusive has a direct acknowledgement that there is exclusion in policy. That's why we are talking about inclusion. The second point I would like to flag in here is, so long we will continue with the growth-centric development process, unless we revert it to the employment-centric, just transferring income to the people, doling out income may not help. At least that is not the empirical evidence. And third point I would like to put before you that we are here for sustainable development, talking about sustainable economic development. So the kind of development that we are going with has enough evidence in data that it is widening gap of inequality. There is exclusion, and therefore this is not sustainable. Meaning thereby that the very much growth path that we are going through has to be changed. This growth path is not going to make us sustainable. Basic question is, the debate of development started right from the beginning in the freedom struggle and thereafter, after independence. Clear-cut debate that whether we are dealing with the man and machine, whether we are dealing with the big machine and small machine, or now you are AI. My question starts from here that he has very cleverly skipped that part. There is major policies of demonetization, GST, and lockdown that has aggravated the position of the downing side of the employment, joblessness, and increasing the disparity. And there is no initiative in that direction. The country is going to work with the corporate, but at the end, he has rightly said that the taxing the wealth. Thomas Piketty told you that the wealth tax, if you are taxing the wealth, can be done. But who will do that? Question is, who will do that? Because our government is ready to give everything to the corporates, and then saying sabka saath, sabka vishwas, sabka vikas, sabka prayas. Are we going to say no to the taxes? Because we are giving the taxes to the government. So this federal structure needs to be discussed and understood, and the growth process specific needs to be dealt with more rigorously, and we have to draw a line that if such a growth process of 70, this Amrit Kal, so-called Amrit Kal and Amrit Mahotsav, if it is not going to solve the problem of poverty and inequality, after some time, are we not in a position to debate it and do away with the growth process that we are, and we can let us start new experiments otherwise if possible, but for that you need democratic space, people's voice, and I am reminded by Gandhi's saying that when Nehru said that how can we say that this policy is good or bad, Gandhi had one sentence and he said, just keep in mind the poorest people that you have seen ever. And whatever policy you are doing, see that whether that policy is going to help them. We had such Ujjwala or many things, but 1200 rupees LPG cylinders. Now nothing is being done. Earlier things were in the hands of middle class to handle it. I will go by the Thomas Piketty when he said that when we are talking of the development, is the development of politics of development as well. He has very skillfully escaped the politics of development. He has gone through the data set, rich data set, and I congratulate for his rich data set and the kind of submission that he has made powerfully. But then that is an ongoing process of development. We need to draw a line. Thank you very much for giving this opportunity to chair this session. I am grateful indeed for this honor. And now I will look forward to the organizer to give some announcements so that we can move ahead. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Now we shall proceed for lunch. I request the invited speakers and guests to join us in the adjoining room for lunch. And for the participants, we have a separate arrangement. Participants are requested to check their conference kit bags. You have food coupons there and you need to show that coupon before having lunch. Thank you.
Lunch break. ये तो अपने बन गए।